You've been quiet for too long, not because you have nothing to say, but because the world has convinced you that silence is weakness, that being loud is strength, that extroversion is the standard and stillness is something to fix. They called you shy. They called you soft. They mistook your quiet for fear, your reflection for hesitation, your solitude for loneliness. But they were wrong. And now it's time to remember who you are, because you are not small. You are not silent. You are deliberate. The world doesn't need another loud voice echoing what's already been said. The world needs your voice, the one that speaks after thought, not before it. The one that whispers truth in a room full of noise. The one that doesn't need a spotlight to shine, because it carries light from within. There is power in the pause. There is clarity in the quiet. And when you speak, not to impress, not to perform, but to connect, the world listens. History was never changed by volume. It was changed by vision. And introverts have always been the ones to see beyond the surface, to sit, to study, to understand what others rush past. While the world was talking, you were noticing. While they were debating, you were thinking. While they were broadcasting, you were becoming. And now, it's your time. Not to become someone else. Not to mimic the noise, but to step into the strength of your true design. Because this world is starving for voices that don't compete. They contribute. It's time to stop holding back, not by becoming louder, but by becoming clearer. They made you believe you had to change to matter. That success looked like shouting. That leadership looked like commanding rooms with charisma. But the greatest leaders didn't always stand in the spotlight. They built from behind the scenes. They led through wisdom. They moved through quiet conviction, not noise. Einstein. A man of few words, but a mind that reshaped the universe. Rosa Parks. She didn't yell, she just sat. But her silence roared across history. Abraham Lincoln, measured, thoughtful, soft-spoken. Yet his words carried the weight of freedom. So what makes you think you have to perform to be powerful? You've been gifted with observation. You hear what others miss. You see beneath what others accept. That is not a flaw. That is a force. You process before you speak. You feel before you act. You reflect before you move. That is wisdom in motion. That is restraint that builds respect. And let me be clear, you don't need to become louder. You need to become more you, because the world doesn't need another echo. It needs a voice that cuts through the noise like still water in a storm. That is your voice, not forged in performance, but shaped by presence. You were not born to hide. You were born to build from within. And when you speak, it will not be to get attention. It will be to create alignment. You don't shout because you don't need to. You don't perform because your truth doesn't need decoration. You speak only when it matters. And that is what makes you dangerous. They tell you to put yourself out there. They want you to network more, talk more, smile more. But no one ever says, go deeper. Think sharper. Speak only when it's true. But that's your way. And it always has been. You don't speak to fill silence. You speak to fill souls. You don't talk to be heard. You talk to be understood. And the ones who matter will feel it when you finally do. Because when you speak, it means something. There's no performance in your tone. There's no pretense in your presence. There's only weight. The kind that lingers long after the noise has passed. Your voice is not a shout. It is a compass. It doesn't tell people what to do. It reminds them who they are. And if you've ever felt like your voice was too quiet to matter, know this. Quiet doesn't mean small. It means centered, rooted, purposeful. The world doesn't need more volume. It needs more truth, more honesty, more vulnerability. And you carry that, not because you're loud, but because you've listened. While others were building personas, you were building character. While they were crafting opinions, you were cultivating insight. You weren't silent because you lacked words. You were silent because you were shaping them. and now they are ready. So speak. Not because you finally become louder, but because the world is finally quiet enough to hear what only you can say. You have to understand something. Your silence was never a void. It was a forge. Every moment you spent listening, thinking, feeling, it was shaping you. While they mistook your quiet for absence, you were gathering power. While they chased approval, you built depth. And now that you speak, it's different. There's no fluff, no filler, just the truth, wrapped in gravity. And that's what the world is dying for. Not more hype, not more noise, but substance. And substance only comes from the depths you've dared to explore. You didn't rush. You didn't conform. You chose stillness when the world sprinted. You chose solitude when they begged for crowds. You chose truth over attention. And now, when you speak, people feel something they can't explain, because you're not echoing the world. You're echoing your soul. There's a calmness in you now, and it's unnerving, because calm is the rarest kind of power. It doesn't react. It doesn't explain. It doesn't beg to be seen. It just is. That calm, that voice that doesn't tremble when it speaks the truth, that presence that enters a room and changes its temperature without saying a word, that is what happens when an introvert stops shrinking and starts standing. Not standing above others, but standing within yourself, rooted, aligned, unshaken. You've waited long enough. You've withheld your voice thinking it was a courtesy, but now you realize it's a responsibility, because your silence once protected you, but your voice will free someone else. You never needed a spotlight. You are the light. And the moment you stop dimming yourself to make others comfortable, you become a force they can't ignore, because you've seen too much to stay silent, felt too deeply to pretend, understood too clearly to hold back. The world has enough noise. What it needs now is clarity. And your voice, and soft as it may be, carries that clarity. A voice that has been tested in solitude, refined in doubt, sharpened in silence. And now it's time to release it. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait to feel ready. Don't wait for someone louder to give you room. Speak anyway. Move anyway. Lead anyway. Because when you speak from alignment, from integrity, from truth, you don't need to shout. Your energy delivers the message before your mouth ever moves. Look around. The world is loud and lost. People scroll for hours but can't find connection. They talk all day but say nothing real. They're surrounded by noise but starving for meaning. You carry that meaning, and you don't need followers to lead. You don't need a stage to make impact. You don't need approval to be effective. All you need is the courage to stop hiding. You've listened long enough, you've learned enough, you've prepared enough. Now speak, not to prove anything, not to please anyone, but to light the way for someone still trapped in their own silence. When you rise, you won't do it with noise. You'll do it with presence. The kind that doesn't demand attention, it commands it. Because real influence doesn't scream, it resonates. And your voice, shaped by silence, carved by solitude, carries a frequency this world forgot how to hear. It doesn't ride trends. It doesn't beg to go viral. It speaks truth that endures long after the noise dies down. This is your reminder. You were never invisible. You were observing. You were never behind. You were becoming. Now, let them talk. Let them rush. Let them chase. You move with intent. You speak with weight. You live with depth, because you've learned the secret. The ones who talk the least often have the most to say. So speak. Speak for the ones who still believe their quiet makes them weak. Speak for the younger version of you who kept shrinking to fit in. Speak for the misfits, the deep thinkers, the quiet leaders, the ones who feel everything and say nothing. And most of all, speak for yourself. Because this world needs your voice, not louder, not trendier, just truer. When you finally do, you won't just change your life. You'll awaken others who've been waiting in silence, wondering if they were the only ones who felt this way. They weren't. You're here now, and your voice has arrived.